one of the things that we've done is we've looked at the levels of public spending across Scotland. There's a big debate on at the moment about how we spend our money, what we spend it on, whether we should have universal services, and we've discovered that only 12% of households in Scotland are actually net contributors to the economy. That is, that the thousands, and indeed in some cases tens of thousands of pounds worth of tax that they pay is less than they get back in terms of what's spent on road repairs, on health services, on education services, on welfare spend.
And where are you getting these figures from?
Well, we get these figures from the Independent Information Service at the Scottish Parliament. They're based on the Scottish Government's own figures, and I guess that's the reason why you'll see this morning that the SNP have come out and attacked me pretty strongly, but they've not attacked the figures. They haven't challenged them, they haven't said that they're wrong, and that's because they're based on the government's own figures. Well,
indeed, but Professor John McLaren in the Scotsman today says these figures from GERS, the Government Expenditure Revenue Scotland report, could also, in the same report, suggest the figure for net contributors could be as high as 34%. So these figures may not be 100% accurate.
Well, actually, I think what he's been looking at is he's looked at the ONS baseline and hasn't looked at the GERS uplift for that for Scotland. So if he goes back to we put out a big table yesterday with all of the different figures intact. And like I say, we double and triple checked this with the Scottish Parliament's own information service. And it was them that gave us this figure and pointed us to this number.
Why is it a bad thing, if your figures are correct, that the majority of people are helped in some way by the state?
Well, I'm not sure that it's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is that we need to have, or we're beginning to have, finally, an honest debate in Scotland about what it is we spend our money on. And in order to have that honest debate, we need to have the information out there about exactly where that expenditure goes, exactly where the income comes from. And what I find astonishing about this spat is like I say, I mean, the SNP have come out pretty strongly. I believe they've even asked for an apology for me for introducing facts and figures to the debate. Now, let's not get anything wrong here, Gary. This is a Scottish Government which is not only using taxpayers' money to take people to court to stop them finding out information, but just last week, we in the Scottish Conservatives asked the Scottish Government to put out any figures, the most up-to-date figures they have, of projections of how spending in Scotland is going to change over the next 10 years. Things like, how much do we project that free prescriptions, which we know costs in the region of £36 million now, how much will that change over the next 10 years? Things like student contributions, how much will that change over the next 10 years? And not only did they tell us point blank no, but they actually voted down a very sensible amendment in Parliament in order to give people that information. But there's only one party running scared of this honest debate, Gary, and it's the SNP.
But if you look at all of those figures and those measures that you've just mentioned, combined, they reach somewhere about 3.5% of the Scottish Government's budget. The debate is not just about pounds and pence, is it? It's about what kind of Scotland we want to live in. So do you believe we should be living in a Scotland that doesn't spend 3.5% of the Scottish budget on things like free prescriptions, free personal care, free bus travel, etc.?
I believe that we should live in a Scotland where those who are able and willing to pay, who never asked for freebies, never asked for free aspirin on the NHS because they want to see that money used to give life-saving drugs to people with cancers and rare cancers, which we don't have those drugs in Scotland, we do have them down south. I think that's the kind of country that I want to see, where we have enough money in the pot to help the poorest and most vulnerable in our society, because those people who are earning a good wage, who are happy to contribute, who are happy to pay for or make a contribution to things like the degree that they get at university, to make a contribution to things like the drugs that they get through the NHS. That's the kind of Scotland I want to see.
Why then is that at odds with what George Osborne seems to be suggesting? He's going to announce another £10 billion of welfare cuts in his speech to your party conference today. Many people will see that as being an attack on the vulnerable. He's also going to say working age people have to bear the brunt of the cuts that are coming. Why not the ability to pay?
Well, I think we're looking at how to rebalance our economy generally. The UK government's doing that. I think if you look at the figures, for example, the creation of more than 1 million private sector jobs, you can see some of that rebalancing in action. But also, you do have to look at state spending, and welfare is about a third of the UK budget. We've got a situation in this country that's built up over 13 years of Labour government, where you can go out and earn, more than the average wage, and find somebody who lives next door to you who's not earning at all, bringing home more in benefits. There is a recalibration going on there. You know, I think that the emotive language about targeting this group or that group is exactly that. It's emotive language in order to get away from the big debate. And let's not forget, Gary, 3 out of 4 of your listeners, if they're representative of Scotland, agree with something like the benefits cap, which sees people on benefits not bringing home more than the average working family.
But why not target those? You talked about people earning and being net contributors. Why not target those who earn more? Why shouldn't they pay more?
Well, I think what you'll find, and we certainly got a steer from this from the Liberal Democrat conference, is that these measures aren't happening in isolation.
Well, they want a mansion tax, but that's being ruled out, of course.
No, but you saw, for example, the Prime Minister on the Andrew Marr programme yesterday saying that, you know, taxation would be targeted at those highest earners. Now, I've not seen George Osborne's speech, neither of you, so we're delving slightly into the realms of the hypothetical here.
But we have his past performance to go on, where the 50p tax rate was reduced. That didn't seem like it was targeting those who can pay more.
Now, I think you'll find that when that was introduced, and let's show that our long-term tax rate for highest earners is 5 pence above what the Labour government had for 12 and a half years of the 13 years in office. That was introduced at the same time as we took 1 million people out of taxation altogether at the lower end of income, Gary. So let's not misrepresent what's going on here.
Well, what is going on, though, is that George Osborne says £10 billion has to be taken out of the welfare budget. Now, there are charities who say that because of the changes that the Chancellor wants to introduce, and certainly Ian Duncan-Smith wants to introduce, there'll be some vulnerable people who will be worse off.
No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying...
That's what the charities are saying.
What he's saying from the reports that I've read, Gary, is that there is a recalibration going on in welfare, which would result in... It's not that the £10 million is... You know, what is the aspiration? The £10 million is the outcome from what it is that we're doing in terms of
recalibration. Just means cut, doesn't it? It's just a fancy way of saying cuts.
Well, it can be, but it's about looking to have, and I think if you look at what Ian Duncan-Smith is saying, it's about looking to have a fair and equitable system. And is it fair and equitable that people can take more home in benefits than the average working family earns? We, as a government, I'm not part of the UK government, but the UK government has decided no. It has overwhelming support across the country, and it's looking about how we have the most equitable distribution within that of welfare benefits.